This is the Venezianico Nereide Bronzo 39. And while it may be a bit of a mouthful, especially for those of us who don't know Italian, it's also a great solid diver. If you remember my last review from Venezianico, I really wasn't a fan of that watch. But I gotta say, this one may be their best watch yet. Or at least out of the ones I've seen, as it's nicely built with a beautiful straightforward design, fairly thin, and most important of all, it's extremely comfortable on the wrist. Now, since this review is fairly straightforward, it's a, what you see is kind of what you get sort of watch, I'm gonna keep this a little bit simple. I'm just gonna focus on the good, the bad, and the just okay. But before we get to all of that, I do have a couple things I want to mention. And the first, and you guessed it, is a disclaimer that this watch was provided by the brand and they aren't asking for it back, hence the promotional tag. And the other thing is that I think Venezianico deserves some credit here. They recently announced that they're making their own movement, one made in Italy, and that's huge for any brand, let alone a smaller or micro brand. It's kind of a crazy announcement from them. Now, this movement is at a much higher price tier than what we're looking at today, but the fact they're doing it, I think, is pretty noteworthy. That said, let's get to it, and let's start off with what's great here. And the first thing is its size. From their other divers, Venezianico has brought this one down a bit, creating a 39mm diver with a snug lug-to-lug of 45.5. And due to the thinner Miyota 9039 movement, it also has a very slender profile with a total thickness of 10.65, which goes from the closed case back all the way to the top of the sapphire crystal. And a little bit of art history, kind of a tangent here, is the case back, as the case back depicts the 4 horses of St. Mark's Basilica in Venice, which is a set of 4 bronze horses that date all the way back to antiquity. Kind of a nice little touch. They're bronze statues, so something nice to put on a bronze watch. And if you want even more of a deep dive, those horses have a bit of a history. I think they were originally taken from Constantinople, and then when Napoleon took over Italy, he took them to France for a bit, so they've been around. But the main thing here is that they've created a platform almost anyone, including those in the slim-wristed club, can wear. And wear comfortably throughout the entire day, I might add. And especially with the tropical strap, and it being so thin, it has a really low center of gravity. In fact, when I put it on, it kind of reminded me of the first time I tried a Glycine Combat Sub, which is another remarkably thin diver out there. But here, this one has a lot more depth to the dial than Glycine. So great size, it's nice and thin, and also fairly lightweight. I think the total weight here is 86 grams, which is practically nothing. And especially for a watch with a ton of visual punch and presence. This is a gorgeous looking design, one I think you can firmly refer to as a dress diver with its bronze case and gilded color scheme. Now, thanks to the bronze, it is a little bit flashy right now. But remember, bronze does darken over time, and it will get a little bit more subtle as patina develops. And I think that's going to look great with the gilded dials. It's going to add some contrast. There's also a white dial option out there, giving it maybe a cleaner look. But I think black is the way to go. It's just more classic, and I think it goes better with the bronze case. And the black dial here is gorgeous. It's the first thing I actually noticed when I put the watch on. This deep dark flat finish, which looks great with the gilded hands and bar indices floating above it. The one thing I thought was a little bit odd here was the slightly skeletonized hands, which to be fair is part of the brand and common with their design language, but it does make it a little bit harder to see at certain angles. However, thanks to the white loom at the ends, it was always fairly easy as a whole to make out. It's just you couldn't necessarily see the base of it. I also really like the simple symmetry of the design. That there's no date, and while there is still some text at the bottom, it does seem to symmetrically match the logo and the name at the top. And I think overall it comes across as a relatively clean design, even with all the flash and pizzazz. Now, as you would expect, it's also fairly well built. Feels nice and solid in the hand, with no real sharp edges to speak of. And as typical with a lot of divers these days, it is a mostly brushed finish with polished chamfers, which are there to bring out the overall case outline. Although again, another thing to remember is that this is bronze, and as it patinas, it will tone everything down a little bit. The bezel is also good here with a bronze insert to match the case. Now it is a little bit stiff when you're first turning it, and there is just a touch of backplay to it. But there's also a good grip and a nice solid clicky action to it. So all the really important bits here are good. It's got a solid build, great design, and very comfortable. But as for what's just okay, well, the first thing I'd say is the rubber strap. Now it is kind of a good strap. It's got nice matching hardware, but for the price, it's nothing really overly interesting. It's just a commonly good rubber strap. And as you might have guessed already, since this is a bronze case, there isn't a bracelet option. Luckily though, it looks great on a variety of straps. Loom here is also just okay. The design is fairly standard with just a blue BGW9 everywhere, but it also lasts about as long as your standard Seiko diver. Which, to be fair, is good, but in the world of microbrands, I kind of consider that just okay. The crown is also a little small here. It's nestled in those crown guards, and if you happen to have some pudgier fingers than I do, you might have a hard time unscrewing it. But the other side of that coin is that it also doesn't stand out and I think disappears into the overall design. Now, as for the straight negatives with this one, I have three. The first is the design, which I know I also listed as a strength, but it's kind of a double-edged sword here. Because while it's a great-looking, flashy dress diver, not everyone wants a dress diver. In fact, the entire concept of a dressier diver kind of breaks some people's brains, just like seeing leather on a diver. Just does not compute. Plus, not everyone wants a bronze watch. Some people just want a standard steel diver in blue, which there's nothing wrong with, and don't get me wrong here. I think everyone should have a really good steel diver with a blue dial. It's kind of the standard diver. But, I mean, if you're looking at your second, third, 10th, 20th diver, live a little, get something different. But my main point here is that this particular watch is combining two very niche design segments in one. Talking a dress diver and bronze, which makes it perfect for some, but not everyone. The other thing I want to bring up here is that this is a 39mm diver, which again isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, 3 years ago, if I were to do this review, everyone would be excited to have another great 39mm diver out there. But these days, and especially over the last year, there have been so many announced and so many released that I think there's a little bit of burnout out there. So if you're releasing something like that, you do need to do something to help it stand out. And luckily, Venezianico went with a design that does stand out. With that bronze and gilded color scheme here, it's not something you see every day, let alone in a sub 40mm watch. And the last negative here is price, which is kind of a common theme of Venezianico. MSRP here is $800 US, which I'm sure you guys are going to comment on. You always do, so I figure might as well just talk about it. Now, in my opinion, considering the watch, I don't think $800 is unreasonable. Yet at the same time, when you look around and you consider this is a watch without a bracelet, it's also not a great or an exceptional deal either. I think it's kind of on the higher side of normal, shall we say. Which again is typical for the brand. You kind of always pay a premium with their watches. Although one thing I did want to point out is that their website says it also includes free shipping and, more importantly, covers taxes and duties you might encounter. And in this day and age, with who knows what's going on with taxes and duties, at least here in the US, that's a good thing. Helps you know exactly what to expect. Bottom line, it's a little pricey, but a great solid looking dress diver that's extremely comfortable. So if you like the design, you like the idea of a bronze Venetian Black Bay kind of watch, this one is definitely worth looking into. Now, as usual, let me know your thoughts on this one down below, as well as what are your thoughts on Venezianico in general. And as always, you guys know what to do down below. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. I'm Shane, this is Relative Time, and I'll see you next time.